Welcome back, everyone, to the All Things Marine Life podcast. I'm your host, Caleb, and I'm thrilled that you've decided to join me for episode 3. If you follow me on Instagram, at All Things Marine Life, then you probably saw that poll that I posted asking what video or what animal you'd like me to cover next on a podcast. And many of you voted for the box jelly. It actually won the poll. If you don't follow me on Instagram, go ahead and give me a follow at the link down below in the description. I'll put it on Spotify as well as on YouTube in the description as well. So box jellies won this podcast poll. So that is what the topic of today's podcast is going to be. So we're going to dive into some of the most venomous animals on the planet today. So I hope everyone's having a great day today. I am fully caffeinated. I'm not fully caffeinated. I'm actually, funny enough, I'm taking a break from caffeine, or I'm trying to at least. I usually drink about 2 Celsiuses a day, but I feel my insides screaming every now and then whenever I have that much. So I decided to try and cut them out. I also just want to reset my caffeine tolerance anyways, because caffeine right now just prevents me from having a headache. And if I don't have enough of it, I'll have a headache. It doesn't really give me much energy. So yeah, I'm on my second cup of coffee today. I just had it, so I'm in good shape, especially to do this podcast. And I've probably rambled a little too much, so hopefully you haven't tuned me out just yet. But I hope everyone's having a great day. So let's talk about some box jellies. Now, I also did include lots of your questions that you asked as well. I will go through those at the end as well. So we're going to dive headfirst into this fascinating, sometimes fearful world of box jellyfish. They're the most venomous creatures in the ocean. And by the end of this episode, you're not only going to understand why they're so infamous, you'll also probably start calling them murder cubes too, which I think is a funny nickname that I've gave them. We've got questions from you all once again to answer, so let's start from the top though. What is a box jelly? Well, for starters, they're not your average jellyfish. While most jellies are part of the class Scyphozoa, box jellies belong to a different class altogether called Cubozoa. So while they are still jellies, they're not your typical jelly. They're a little bit more advanced. That's usually what I say when I'm describing them to people. They're a little bit more advanced. They also have tentacles on the 4 corners of their bell, whether that be a cluster of tentacles or just a singular tentacle. Now, true jellies have tentacles around their entire bell. They also don't have a cube-shaped bell if they are in the class Scyphozoa. Hence the name Cubozoa. That's why they're called box jellies. That name makes sense when you look at them. Their bell or their body is literally cube-shaped. So imagine a clear cube, kind of like a gelatinous dye floating through the water with those tentacles trailing off of each corner. Sometimes it's just a couple of tentacles, and sometimes, once again, it's just one. Or, like the notorious Chironex fleckeri, also known as the sea wasp or the Australian box jelly, there can be up to 60 tentacles total. 15 tentacles at each corner of the bell is what Chironex fleckeri or the sea wasp has. Each one is absolutely loaded with venomous stinging cells that are called nematocysts. Now, both true jellies and box jellies are in the phylum Cnidaria. Once again, Cnidaria is spelled with a C, so the C is silent. Scientists are weird like that. We like to name things like cnidarians or ctenophores. Both of those words, even though you don't hear a C sound, there is a C in the front of them, which I know that's a whole random little tidbit right there for you, but hopefully you enjoyed that little fun fact. So they are cnidarians. Now, Cnidaria, the phylum Cnidaria, also includes sea anemones, corals, hydroids, siphonophores like the Portuguese man-o-war, box jellies, and then true jellies as well. So what all these animals have in common is that they have these stinging cells called nematocysts. So what also makes box jellies so unique is they have some of the most advanced visual systems among invertebrates. They actually have 24 eyes. Yeah, you heard me. A jelly has eyes. They're arranged in clusters called rhopalia, and some of those even have lenses and retinas like our eyes. Scientists believe that they use those eyes to detect obstacles like mangrove roots and navigate around them, so they don't just drift around like normal jellies do. They actually can steer. That's pretty wild for them because box jellies don't have a brain. But where do they live? Well, I actually had a couple of questions, and we'll go back over this as we go through the podcast. But where do box jellies live? Well, box jellies are found in warm coastal waters throughout the Indo-Pacific region, including places like Thailand, the Philippines, Malaysia, Papua New Guinea, and especially Northern Australia, which is the box jelly capital of the world, if you didn't know that already. But they're also not limited to the Pacific. There are some species that are found in the Caribbean, Gulf of Mexico, and even parts of the Atlantic near West Africa and the Red Sea. There are box jellies that can be found in Florida. My Florida friends, there are box jellies that can sometimes be found there. I actually have a couple of old coworkers that got stung by some. They were completely fine. It was very painful though. So they did not have a good time with that. They accidentally jumped on them at night. So pretty interesting right there. And those are called the Caribbean box jellies that are found over in that area. They're found in the Caribbean as well as part of Florida, especially down in the Florida Keys. That's where you can kind of find them. They're not as deadly as the kinds that you can find over in the Indo-Pacific though. And that goes for a lot of things. Most of the deadly stuff is found in the Indo-Pacific when it comes to the ocean. But anyways, for the size of these animals, well, it really depends on the species. The largest one is going to be Chironex fleckeri. You'll hear this name a lot. Chironex fleckeri is the sea wasp or the Australian box jelly. Potentially pretty much the most venomous animal on the planet, arguably. They can have a bell, which is the main body, not the stinging portion, just the main body of the jelly, the pulsating part. They can have a bell as big as 38 centimeters or about the size of a volleyball. And their tentacles can stretch to be 10 feet or almost 3 meters long. The smallest of them the smallest of the box jellies, like the irukandjis. For example, one species is Carukia barnesi. They're only about the size of a peanut, but don't let that fool you. That sting still packs a terribly strong punch that sends people to the hospital pretty regularly. Now, what causes that sting? That's what we really want to know. These things are super venomous. Let's talk about it. Along those tentacles are rows and rows of these nematocysts, these little microscopic harpoons that fire when they're triggered by touch. So basically, when something brushes up against it, it kind of opens this little door for this harpoon that is all wound up and full of venom to be injected into the skin of the victim. So the venom that box jellies have is insanely potent. We're talking about cardiotoxins, neurotoxins, and dermonecrotic toxins. Basically, they can stop your heart, fry your nerves, and they can destroy skin cells all at once. And it leaves a pretty nasty welt on your skin as well. Now, if somebody gets stung, or if you ever get stung by a box jelly, here's what you can do to help. Immediately get out of the water. Panic can cause people to drown, especially if you're stung. Just try to stay as calm as possible, but get out of the water immediately. Pour vinegar on the sting site for about 30 seconds or so. It helps neutralize and dissolve any unfired nematocysts, which are those stinging cells once again. You're also going to want to try and carefully remove any tentacles that are left on the skin with tweezers, something else like a stick or like some gloves. And also use hot water, as hot as you can tolerate, for the pain relief. It actually helps break down the venom quicker rather than using ice. Don't use ice. Use hot water, as hot as you can tolerate. Even if it is a little painful, the hotter the better, essentially. And obviously, if the symptoms are pretty severe, you have trouble breathing or anything like that, call emergency services. It never hurts to just go get it checked out, especially if you know that it was a very dangerous type of box jelly. There is an anti-venom for the Chironex fleckeri, the Australian box jelly, but it's only found in certain hospitals, mostly in the Australian region. So vinegar is going to be your best first line of defense. And please do not pee on it. I've said this multiple times. When I was working on cruise ships, I have a talk called the most venomous sea creatures. And I always end on a note. If you're ever stung or bitten by anything, don't pee on it. That's an old urban legend, myth of sorts. Peeing could just make the infection worse. Don't pee. No alcohol, no fresh water. That's just going to make it worse. And definitely no pee. Yeah. It's funny. It's funny because I was on a what was it? I was doing an excursion once in, I believe it was Aruba or some Caribbean island. I can't remember. I've been to several of them, and they were saying on the boat, I don't know why I'm thinking this is so random, but I'm a very random person, and if you're listening to the podcast, hopefully that is okay with you. I was on a excursion one time, and it was a snorkel excursion, and they said, like, they were like saying, like, if you get stung by anything, just remember Caribbean pee is the best. And I was like, okay. I wanted to correct them and say don't pee on it, but they were just trying to get a joke out. So yeah, I had to bite my tongue. I was like, all right, I'll let them have that. Anyways, enough of that. Anyways, moving on, some of the life cycle of box jellies, it's pretty fascinating. It's still pretty mysterious. There's not a whole lot that we know about it. It kind of starts off with this planula larvae that settles and becomes this little polyp on the seafloor. Similar to true jellies, they have that same kind of lifestyle. They have that same kind of planula larvae that settles, becomes a polyp. That polyp can live for quite some time, cloning itself or basically just chilling until the time is right. Then it will transform and release this bell-shaped Medusa stage, which is the adult jelly that we all know about. Here's the kicker though, for some species, we don't even know what their polyp stage looked like until recently. Scientists only discovered the irukandji polyp in 2022, and we still don't really know the full life cycle of other polyps. So if you're looking for a marine biology thesis idea, there you go. Box jelly polyps could be something you could look into. Something that might need some more research, essentially. Now let's answer some fun things right here. Can they feel anything? Can they feel happy, sad, or silly? I believe somebody asked that question. The short answer is no. Box jellies don't really have brains. Instead, they have a nerve net and clusters of eyes. So while they can react to some stimuli and even learn in a very basic way, there's not really any evidence that they experience emotions. So they don't have brains. They don't have anything that can allow them to experience that. That being said, they do actively swim much faster than most other jellies at speeds of up to 4 knots, which is pretty quick for a gelatinous blob. And thanks to those eyes, they can avoid obstacles and potentially recognize shapes and movement. So in a way, they're not just drifting, they're navigating, which is pretty interesting when you think about it. Most jellies, true jellies, they have no sense of knowing where they're at. They don't have any form of knowing where they're at or anything. They rely strictly on the currents. And these jellies are a lot more advanced and have the ability to basically steer, which is really cool when you think about it. And now, what do these animals really feed on? It's going to mostly be fish and crustaceans that they run into. And obviously those tentacles are extremely venomous, so they can definitely reel those in and capture prey very, very easily by essentially, as soon as a prey item brushes against one of those tentacles, it causes some pretty crazy, stunning problems right there for that prey item. Usually they're subdued very easily. So let's talk about some fatalities. So not all box jellies are deadly, but there are a few that definitely can be. We've already talked about a couple of them. So Chironex fleckeri, that's the most dangerous and has caused several dozen deaths in Australia over the past couple of decades. Other species like the irukandji, they can actually trigger something known as irukandji syndrome. It's a condition involving severe pain, muscle cramps, anxiety, vomiting, and sometimes even cardiac complications. Globally, estimates suggest that box jellies can cause dozens of deaths each decade, though underreporting is a major issue in some places where there's not as much availability to certain medical facilities like Southeast Asia. Some sources suggest there could be 20 to 40 serious cases per year worldwide, possibly more we just don't know about. And that goes for lots of things. If you look up any kind of venomous animal or really any kind of potentially dangerous animal in general, there's going to be lots. There could be reported deaths and there could be some unreported deaths. Maybe that person died by something and you just never identified what caused it. So that's something to keep in mind as well when it comes to fatalities for really anything. So keep that in mind. Now, what's interesting is that some of these deaths can be pretty localized. So, for example, several decades ago in Australia, on one specific beach, there was like 35 people stung in one day at one beach. Very localized. Now, the reason for that is box jellies, even though they can swim faster than true jellies, they still technically are a form of plankton. They rely heavily on the ocean currents to kind of push them all around the world. So basically, what people don't realize is that plankton doesn't just mean you're talking about very small sea creatures. Sometimes plankton can be large animals you can see with your own eye, like some large jellies. So when you're talking about something as being planktonic, it's a lifestyle. It's not necessarily how big something is. Like the lion's mane jelly, they can have a bell the size of 8 feet or more. That's a very large jelly, but it's still considered plankton because it can't swim against the current. If something is planktonic, it means that it relies on the current. It basically goes with the flow, For example, jellies, siphonophores, copepods, anything that goes with the flow of the current and relies on that to push them all around the world, that's going to be considered planktonic. Now, if something is nectonic or marine nekton, that's something that's free swimming. So, for example, squid, fish, turtles, marine mammals, those are going to be marine nekton. Now, if it's a benthic animal, that means that it's going to be on the seafloor, crawling around on the seafloor. And obviously, if it's sessile, that means it's kind of stationary. That's just something like a sponge or a hydroid that's stationed onto an object. So that's something to think about right there. Now, let's talk about a couple of these species really quickly of the box jellies. So obviously we have Chironex fleckeri, which is a very well-known, probably the most well-known of the box jellies. The largest, the most deadly, found in northern Australia. Their tentacles can reach 10 feet long. Now, there is an anti-venom for this species, so that's the good news. It is the most deadly of them, but also there is a way to combat that with the anti-venom. Now, how do they get the anti-venom? They basically extract the tentacles. There is a venom lab in Australia. If you've ever seen River Monsters, there's an episode where Jeremy Wade actually does some sea creature episodes. So he goes out into Australia and actually picks up a box jelly. If you pick them up from the bell, it's completely safe. Don't recommend doing it. If you're listening and you live in Australia, please don't go out picking up box jellies. Not for fun, even as tempting as it might sound. But he went out there to help harvest those tentacles. Now, those tentacles can grow back, but basically what they do is they go out there, they pick up the animal from the bell. Using scissors, they cut off some of the tentacles to take back and do some processing in a lab to help make that anti-venom. So pretty interesting that they're able to do that with the Chironex fleckeri, with that right there. Now, those tentacles do grow back. Now, what's interesting, all you need is 6 feet of one tentacle to kill you. So if you think about it, if a large sea wasp has 60 tentacles, each of them are 10 feet long, all you need is 6 feet of one tentacle. You can imagine how deadly it can be if you are stung by multiple tentacles. If you are swimming in an area where they're found and all of a sudden you get tangled up in all of these tentacles, you can see how that could be a pretty crazy problem right there. So keep that in mind when we're talking about these large jellies. Now, what's also interesting, there's a couple of fun facts when it comes to some of the stings in general. So, for example, in lots of places in Australia, and my Australian listeners, feel free to comment down below backing this up. There are lots of beaches that actually have these signs out that say, like, sea wasps in the area, or be careful, jellies. They also have these nets set up to protect against the Australia box jelly, which is like the largest one. The Chironex fleckeri, which we're still talking about. So they'll have these nets set up to protect against them, but there are holes in that net that these smaller jellies that are box jellies can get through. The irukandjis can get through those, and that's where lots of people get stung. Lots of people actually get stung in areas where those nets are set up because the smaller ones just somehow make their way through those little holes. So that'll bring us to the next animal, or the next species, which is Carukia barnesi, which is an irukandji jelly. And basically, it's a really venomous jelly known as the irukandji. And it was actually named after Dr. Jack Barnes, who was searching for the jelly that caused that irukandji syndrome. So, pretty interesting. And there's a couple of irukandji type marine box jellies out there. So it's not just the one species of irukandji. There's a couple of different ones. This one is found in the off of northern Australia, from Western Australia to Queensland. It's usually swept in, usually in the summer. It's rarely found off of Sydney and Melbourne if you're found in that area. So it's a very venomous species as well. So those are two of the most venomous species right there. Now there's also Mallow-kingi, which is another irukandji species that has caused fatalities before. There's not as much known about this one per se. Mallow-kingi is another irukandji as well. It's also called the common kingslayer. It was first described in 2007, so that goes to show that there's still so much to learn about the ocean. There's actually four species in that genus Mallow, most of which are going to be considered irukandjis. So their venom actually can kill by raising blood pressure to lethal levels, and it can cause brain hemorrhages as a result of that. So pretty interesting. Now there's also another one. This one's found usually in Hawaii. There's Alatina alata. Alatina alata is a little bit different. It's usually called the sea wasp in that area, and it's very common in Australia. It usually feeds on zooplankton. They're sometimes found in the Hawaiian area, as I mentioned. Usually they monthly swarm post full moon, so pretty interesting. There's also Tamoya oboya, which is a funny name, in my opinion. Some of these names are kind of funny, the scientific names anyways. Found in the Caribbean. That's going to be basically the way this one got its scientific name is pretty interesting. So Tamoya oboya was actually named by a school kid who literally said, "Oh boya, jelly." So pretty interesting. These are also really cool ones. Their tentacles usually kind of have these stripes on them. They're also called the banded box jelly. They can be found in Bonaire. They're sometimes called the Bonaire banded box jelly, or simply banded box jelly. They have a very painful sting. It causes some intense pain. It has like this reddish orange color bands on those tentacles, and it has only 4 tentacles. There's only been about 50 sightings of this jelly since 1989, and only about 3 reported incidents of stings in that area. So there's not a lot really known about it. It's a fairly unstudied species of jelly. So pretty interesting to think about right there now. But those are a couple of the species right there of those box jellies. So let's jump into some of your questions that you guys sent me. Some of these might have been asked more than once, but I'm going to just read off every single question that I received. So let me pull those up really quick and get into it. So what Boba Bose asks, what parts of the world are they found in? Well, they're mostly in the warm coastal waters of the Indo-Pacific, like Australia, Thailand, Philippines, Indonesia, but they can also be found in the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico and lower Florida, like in the Florida Keys or near Miami. And Boba Bose also asks, how big are they? Well, it varies by the species. Once again, the largest of them, the Australian box jelly, can have a bell the size of a volleyball with 10-foot long tentacles, whereas the smallest of them, like the irukandjis, are about the size of a peanut or a coin. Now, those irukandjis, some of those, even though they have a bell that's like the size of a coin, they can have tentacles that stretch up to 3 feet long. So you can imagine, they're pretty much invisible. So it's kind of hard to know when you're stung unless you have seen one. So anyways, Honey Mermaid asks, first actions after one gets stung. Once again, get out of the water immediately. use some vinegar, remove any tentacles, use hot water as hot as you can tolerate. And obviously call emergency services if the symptoms are pretty severe or you feel lightheaded or anything like that. Honey Mermaid also asks, are all box jellyfish dangerous for us? Well, no, not all of them are dangerous. There's only a couple of them that are life-threatening. Most of them just cause some pretty nasty stings. It's going to be painful and not pleasant, but, most of the times people are fine. Now, Honey Mermaid also asks, how many different species or types are there? There's around 50 described species, but there's probably many more out there that could be discovered in the future. We're always learning and discovering new species in the ocean, so that's definitely a very large possibility. Evan Menard asks, can they feel happy or sad or maybe a little silly? No, they can't because they don't have a brain, but they can respond to light and stimuli, which is still pretty impressive for something without a brain. Carson O says, what causes the sting? Like, is it just poison and barbs? Its venom is delivered through nematocysts, those tiny little barbed cells that I talked about in the beginning, and they inject venom on contact. Once you brush up against it, then you will kind of see that you'll experience the sting itself. And also, poison and venom are two different things. I know you said, is it just poison and barbs? If something is venomous, venom is injected, poison is ingested. So, for example, if box jellies were poisonous, it means that we would have to eat them in order to get the toxin. But because they're venomous, it means they inject us with the toxin, if that makes sense. So, Boba Bose asks, how many deaths do they cause? There's rough estimates that there's about a few dozen deaths each decade that are confirmed, but there's likely lots of unreported cases. It's hard to find an exact number because there's several that could go unreported. Boba Bose also asks, what is their life cycle like? Well, their life cycle, I mentioned in the beginning, they have an egg. They start out as a planula, then they settle on the seafloor, they become a polyp, and eventually they are released into the wild as a medusa, or the adult jelly, the free-swimming jelly. Some of those life stages still haven't really been confirmed for certain species, but still, for the most part, that's usually what they're going to be living like. So, let's see. I've got some other questions here. Somebody else asked, let me pull it up here. Let's see. Super Sigma 97 says, do they live in boxes? No, they don't. The box actually refers to the shape of their bell, which is very cube-like. But maybe you could theoretically, maybe if you had an aquarium that was box-shaped, theoretically you could say that it lives in a box. If you put a box jellyfish in a box, boxception right there. Think about it. That'd be kind of pretty funny. You think box jellies? Do you think they could box? Like if you gave them boxing gloves, I wonder what they would do. I know what they would do. Probably steer away from it. Let me get a drink of water here. Make sure y'all are staying hydrated out there, especially if you live in Florida. It's starting to heat up down here a lot. So summer is starting to slowly creep up on us. It's already April. It's mid-April. That's crazy. Trippy Taka says, do we know the full box jelly life cycle? Well, once again, not for all the species. We only recently discovered the irukandji polyp stage in 2022. So there's lots left to uncover and think about. So very good questions, though. And then Amy Crawford asks, why are they called box? Well, pretty simply put, just because of the cubic shape of their bell right there. So that is all the questions that I have for today's episode. And thank you all for watching and listening. If you're listening on Spotify, make sure you follow the podcast. Make sure you follow me on all social medias. I have that in the links down below. If you're listening or watching on YouTube, thank you for subscribing. Make sure you're subscribed to my channel. I post lots of videos, whether they're short or long videos, on marine animals all the time. I've also been recently starting this podcast, so any support is greatly appreciated. If there's an animal you want to see in a future podcast or a video about, comment down below. And comment down below, have you ever been stung by a box jelly? Or have you ever seen one? Comment when and where, and if you got stung or if you know someone that's got stung. Comment anything that you have, any of your experiences with box jellies down below. So Thank you all for watching. I'm going to post a poll on my Instagram asking what the next podcast you'd like to see is. Make sure you vote on that poll if you'd like to see certain animals. And then we will discover another animal in the next podcast episode. So if you haven't listened to the other 2 episodes, go ahead and listen to those as well. But thank you all for listening and tuning into today's podcast. I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope you all have an amazing rest of your day. Happy Easter to those of you who celebrate, and I'll catch you all in the next dive into all things marine life.